I stood there in the parking lot of Sullivan's Market, 73 years old, with trembling hands, staring down at a brown package that would crack my world clean open. The delivery driver had already pulled away, leaving me alone with a cardboard box that felt heavier than it should. Inside wasn't drugs, wasn't money. It was something worse, something that proved my daughter Natalie had been dead for 3 years, and my son-in-law Marcus had been cashing her disability checks every single month while I asked about her like a fool. Tell me where you're watching from, because I need to know I'm not alone in this. I need to know that somewhere out there, somebody understands what it feels like when the people you trust most turn your love into their con. My name is Vernon Dupree. I'm 73 now, but back in 2019, I was 70 and living in my small brick house in Richmond, Virginia. The same house where I raised Natalie and her brother Thomas. Bride porch where I taught them to ride bikes. The same kitchen where their mama, God rest her, used to make Sunday dinners that brought the whole neighborhood over. That September morning, I'd only gone to the market for coffee and eggs. I wasn't looking for answers. But the universe don't care what you're looking for. It gives you what you need to see, even when it destroys you. The package had my name on it, written in handwriting I didn't recognize. No return address. Just a note taped to the top that said, "Are you Natalie's father? It's yours now. Just open it alone." My chest went tight. My hand started shaking before I even tore the tape. Inside was a stack of mail. Letters I'd sent to Natalie over the years, all returned, unopened. Beneath that was a hospital bracelet with her name on it. Beneath that, a death certificate dated November 14th, 2016. 'Cause of death. Cardiac arrest following complications from lupus. I stood there in that parking lot and felt my knees try to give out. My baby girl had been gone for 3 years. And Marcus, the man I welcomed into my home, the man I called son, had been lying to my face every single week. It all started back in 2014 when Natalie first brought Marcus home for Sunday dinner. I remember that day clear as church bells. She was 38 then, glowing in a way I hadn't seen since before her mama passed. Marcus was 42, clean cut, worked in pharmaceutical sales, drove a nice car. He shook my hand firm, looked me in the eye, called me sir without me having to ask. My son Thomas pulled me aside in the kitchen and said, "Pop, he seems solid. Natalie's happy. Let her be happy." And I wanted to. Lord knows, I wanted to. After Patricia died, Natalie spiraled. She'd been diagnosed with lupus at 35, lost her teaching job because she kept missing work, moved back in with me for 2 years while she got her disability sorted out. Watching your child suffer and knowing you can't fix it, That's a pain that sits in your chest like wet concrete. So when Marcus came along and she smiled again, I thanked God. They got married quick. 6 months later, small ceremony at Riverside Chapel. I walked her down the aisle in the same church where I'd buried Patricia. Natalie wore a cream dress, simple and beautiful, and when Marcus took her hand, I saw tears in his eyes, real tears. I thought, this man loves my daughter. I thought, she's finally safe. Thomas was Marcus's best man. My younger sister Charlene flew in from Atlanta and cried through the whole ceremony. Afterward, we had a little reception at Golden Corral. Nothing fancy, just family and a few close friends. Marcus stood up and gave a toast. He said, Vernon, you raised an incredible woman. I promise you, I'll take care of her. She'll never want for anything. And I believed him. God forgive me. I believed every word. For the first year, everything seemed fine. Natalie and Marcus moved into a rental townhouse about 15 minutes from me, over in the lakeside area. She'd come by every Sunday after church, sometimes with Marcus, sometimes alone. We'd sit on the porch and drink sweet tea, talk about her health, her treatment, how she was feeling. The lupus was unpredictable. Some days she had energy, other days she could barely get out of bed. Marcus seemed patient with it all. Big text me updates when she had bad flare-ups. Send me pictures of them at the grocery store or watching a movie together. He called me Pops. Er, he'd swing by and help me fix the gutter, mow the lawn when my back was acting up. I kept thinking Patricia would have loved this boy. She would have loved seeing Natalie happy. But then, slowly, things started shifting. Natalie's visits became less frequent. When I'd call, Marcus would answer and say she was resting, or at a doctor's appointment, or just not feeling up to talking. I didn't think much of it at first. Lupus does that, wears you down, makes socializing hard. But then Thomas mentioned he hadn't seen her in a month. Charlene called from Atlanta asking why Natalie wasn't returning her texts. I started feeling this itch in the back of my mind, like when you know something's off but can't put your finger on it. One Sunday, I drove over to their townhouse, unannounced. Marcus answered the door in gym shorts, looking surprised. He said Natalie was at a specialist appointment in D.C. Buh. That it was last minute, that she'd call me later. She didn't call. And when I asked Marcus the next week about the appointment, he got vague. Said it went fine, nothing to worry about. She just needed rest. Bread. That was May of 2016. By September, I'd only seen Natalie twice, both times briefly, and she looked tired, distant, like she wasn't fully there, I told myself. She was just dealing with her illness, that I needed to give her space. But then one evening, Marcus came by my house alone. He sat on my porch, drank a beer, and said, Pops, I need to tell you something. Natalie got an opportunity." I remember the exact way the light hit his face, the way his voice sounded too calm. He said a pharmaceutical company had offered her a remote consulting position. Good money, flexible hours, but she'd need to travel internationally for training. He said she'd be gone for 6 months, maybe a year, working overseas in Switzerland and Germany. He said she'd wanted to tell me herself, but left in a hurry that she'd call once she got settled. I sat there stunned, trying to process it. My daughter, who could barely get through a full day without exhaustion, was suddenly overseas for work. It didn't sit right. But Marcus pulled out his phone and showed me a picture of her at an airport, smiling, waving at the camera. He said, "She's doing better, Pops. This is good for her. She needs this." And because I wanted to believe my child was thriving, I swallowed my doubt and said, "Okay." The calls from Natalie never came. Not in October. Not in November. Not through Christmas. Every time I asked Marcus, he had an answer ready. Time difference, bad connection. She's in meetings. She's exhausted. She'll call soon. He'd show me text messages between them, casual things like, "Miss you, babe," and "Can't wait to be home." And I'd feel guilty for doubting him. Thomas wasn't buying it. He came over one night in January of 2017, sat at my kitchen table, and said, "Pop, something's wrong. Nobody just disappears like this. Not Natalie." I told him to give it time, that maybe she really was just busy. But inside, my gut was screaming. I tried calling her old number. Disconnected. I sent letters to the townhouse address asking Marcus to forward them. He said he would. They never reached her, or at least that's what I thought then. Marcus kept up appearances. He'd still come by, help me with chores, bring groceries when I needed them. He talked about Natalie like she was thriving, said she'd lost weight, was feeling healthier, that the overseas work was a blessing. He showed me photos of European streets, cafes, old buildings. He said she'd taken them, that she was having the time of her life. I wanted to believe it so badly that I ignored the fact that none of the photos actually showed her. Just landscapes, just buildings, just empty streets. When I pointed that out once, Marcus laughed it off. Said she was camera shy now, that she'd gained confidence but didn't like being in pictures. It sounded reasonable enough. Or maybe I just needed it to sound reasonable because the alternative, that my daughter was in trouble, or worse, was too heavy to carry. By spring of 2017, I started having dreams about Natalie. In them, she'd be standing at the end of a long hallway, calling my name. But every time I walked toward her, the hallway stretched longer. I'd wake up sweating, heart pounding, feeling like I'd failed her somehow. Charlene called from Atlanta, and said she'd hired a private investigator to try to find Natalie's work contact information overseas. The investigator came back with nothing. No pharmaceutical company had any record of a Natalie Dupree or Natalie Holloway, her married name, working for them. When I confronted Marcus about it, he got defensive for the first time. He said the company was private, that they valued discretion, that Natalie had signed an NDA and couldn't share details. He said, "Pops, do you not trust me? After everything I've done for you and this family?" And I backed down. Because what kind of father accuses his son-in-law of lying without proof? The months bled together. Summer came and went. Fall arrived. I started going to therapy, something I never thought I'd do because the not knowing was eating me alive. My therapist, a kind woman named Dr. Morgan, asked me what I was most afraid of. I told her I was afraid Natalie was dead and nobody had told me. She asked why I thought that. I said, because a mother knows when something's wrong with her child, and I'm all she's got left of her mother. I should feel it. Morgan suggested I demand a phone call, a video call, something concrete. So I did. I told Marcus I needed to see Natalie, to hear her voice, or I was going to report her missing. He got quiet. Then he said, "Give me 2 weeks. I'll make it happen." 2 weeks passed. He showed up with a voicemail, said Natalie had called while he was in the shower, left a message saying she loved me, that she was okay, that she'd be home by Christmas. I listened to that voicemail 100 times. It sounded like her. The voice, the cadence, the little laugh at the end. I cried. I felt relief. I felt stupid for doubting. But Thomas listened to it once and said, "Pop, that could be AI. That could be anything. We need to see her." I told him to stop. I told him I needed to believe she was alive, because the alternative was unbearable. Christmas 2017 came. Natalie didn't come home. Marcus said the project extended, that she was heartbroken but committed, that she'd be back by spring. I spent Christmas alone. Thomas came by with his wife and kids, but it wasn't the same. The house felt empty. The tree felt like a lie. I kept staring at the ornaments Natalie had made as a kid, little handprint angels and popsicle stick stars, and I wondered if I'd ever see her again. That night, after everyone left, I sat in Patricia's old rocking chair and prayed. I said, "God, if my baby's gone, please just let me know. Don't let me live in this limbo." I didn't get an answer that night. But looking back, I think God was already preparing me for what was coming. He was giving me time to say goodbye to the illusion before he shattered it completely. In early 2018, something strange happened. I was helping Marcus clear out some mail at the townhouse. He'd asked me to stop by while he was at work to let a repairman in, and I saw a stack of envelopes on the kitchen counter. Disability checks made out to Natalie Holloway, all endorsed, all deposited. I stood there staring at them, my brain moving slow, trying to make sense of it. If Natalie was overseas working, why was she still getting disability? And if she wasn't cashing them herself, who was? I took a picture of one of the envelopes with my phone. When Marcus got home, I asked him about it. He didn't flinch. He said Natalie had set up a power of attorney before she left, that he was managing her finances while she was gone, that the disability checks were automatic and she'd deal with it when she returned. He said it so smoothly, so calmly, that I almost believed him. Almost. But I couldn't let it go. I called Social Security and asked if there was any way to verify that my daughter was still alive and receiving benefits appropriately. They said they couldn't give me details without her consent, but that if I suspected fraud, I could file a report. I didn't file one. Not then, because filing a report meant admitting I thought Marcus was stealing from my dead daughter. And I wasn't ready to admit that. I wasn't ready to believe my son-in-law, who'd sat at my table, called me Pops, fixed my gutters, was capable of that level of evil. So I tucked the thought away, buried it under hope and denial, and kept waiting for Natalie to come home. Spring turned to summer. Summer turned to fall. By 2019, it had been 3 years since I'd physically seen my daughter. 3 years of excuses, vague updates, text messages that could have been written by anyone. Thomas stopped coming around as much, not because he didn't care, but because watching me cling to false hope was too painful. Charlene called less frequently. My church friends started asking fewer questions. Everyone had moved on, except me. I was the only one still waiting by the phone, still checking the mailbox, still believing that any day now, Natalie would walk through my front door and everything would make sense. Marcus kept the charade going. He'd mention her casually. Natalie said to tell you happy birthday. Natalie's thinking about coming home for Thanksgiving. But Thanksgiving came and went. Christmas came and went. And I started to feel something shift inside me. Not hope. Not denial. Something colder. Something that felt like knowing. One night in August of 2019, I had another dream. This time, Natalie wasn't in a hallway. She was standing in my backyard, near Patricia's rose bushes, wearing the cream dress from her wedding. She looked young, healthy. She smiled at me and said, "Daddy, I'm okay now. But you gotta stop waiting for me. You gotta let me go." I woke up sobbing. I didn't tell anyone about the dream. But deep down, I think I knew. I think my spirit knew what my mind refused to accept. My daughter was gone, and Marcus had been lying to me for years. The breaking point came in September. I was at Sullivan's Market, just picking up coffee and eggs, when a delivery driver approached me in the parking lot. Young kid, maybe 25, looked nervous. He said, "Excuse me, are you Vernon Dupree?" I said yes. He handed me a package and said, "This is for you. Someone paid me to make sure you got it. They said to tell you, open it alone." Then he got in his van and drove off before I could ask questions. I stood there holding this brown package, my name scrawled across it in unfamiliar handwriting, and I felt my heart start hammering. I didn't open it there. I drove home, sat on my porch, and stared at it for 20 minutes. Finally, I tore the tape. Inside was a stack of letters, my letters, the ones I'd sent to Natalie over the years, all returned unopened. Beneath them was a hospital bracelet. Beneath that, a death certificate. Natalie Elizabeth Holloway. Date of death, November 14th, 2016. I read it 3 times before my brain could process the words. My daughter had been dead for nearly 3 years, and Marcus had been cashing her checks, lying to my face, and letting me believe she was alive. I didn't cry right away. I think I was in shock. I sat on that porch with the death certificate in my lap, watching cars drive by, watching the sun dip lower, and I felt nothing, just numb. Hollow, like someone had scooped out my insides and left me an empty shell. Eventually, Thomas pulled up. He'd been stopping by more often, worried about me, and when he saw my face, he knew. He didn't ask. He just sat down beside me, took the paper from my hands, and read it. Then he started crying. Big, gut-wrenching sobs that shook his whole body. He said, "Pop, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry." And that's when it hit me. That's when I broke. We called the police that night. Detectives came to my house, took statements, examined the package. They said someone had anonymously mailed it. No return address, no fingerprints, paid for in cash at a post office in Maryland. They said it was likely someone who knew what Marcus was doing and couldn't stay silent anymore. Maybe a coworker, maybe a neighbor, maybe someone with a conscience. The detectives went to Marcus's townhouse the next morning. He wasn't there. His car was gone. His phone was off. He'd vanished. They searched the place and found boxes of documents, disability checks, forged signatures, bank statements showing deposits of Natalie's benefits for 3 years straight. They found a laptop with saved templates of text messages, pre-written responses he'd been sending to me and Thomas and Charlene, making us think Natalie was alive. They found a folder of photos he'd downloaded from travel websites, photos he'd shown me, claiming Natalie had taken them. It was all fake. Every piece of it. A calculated, methodical lie designed to bleed my daughter's disability benefits dry while I mourned a ghost. The detectives told me Natalie had died at VCU Medical Center from complications related to lupus. She'd been admitted in early November 2016, her condition deteriorating rapidly. Marcus had been with her. He was listed as her emergency contact, her spouse, her next of kin. It's a... It, 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 when she died, he signed the paperwork. He had her cremated, without telling me, without telling Thomas, without telling anyone. He told the hospital staff that her father was estranged, that there was no other family, that he'd handle everything. And then he walked out with her ashes and her identity and turned my grief into his paycheck. The detective said they'd issue a warrant for his arrest. Fraud, identity theft, embezzlement of government benefits. They said he'd likely face years in prison if they caught him. But they didn't catch him. Not that week. Not that month. Marcus Holloway disappeared like smoke. I spent the next few weeks in a fog. People from church brought casseroles and condolences. Charlene flew in and stayed with me for 2 weeks. Thomas tried to keep me busy, taking me to appointments, making sure I ate, but I barely tasted food, barely slept. All I could think about was the last time I'd seen Natalie in person, May of 2016, sitting in Marcus's living room, looking tired and distant. I'd hugged her. I'd told her I loved her. And 6 months later, she was dead. And I didn't know. I wasn't there. I didn't get to say goodbye. I didn't get to hold her hand or pray with her or tell her one more time that she was my whole world. Marcus stole that from me. He stole her death. And for that, I don't think I'll ever forgive him. The medical examiner released Natalie's cremated remains to me in late October. They'd been sitting in a storage facility, unclaimed, because Marcus had never picked them up. I held the urn in my kitchen, this small ceramic container that held all that was left of my baby girl, and I wept until I thought my chest would cave in. We held a memorial service at Riverside Chapel, the same church where she got married, the same church where Patricia was buried. Thomas gave a eulogy. Charlene read a poem. I couldn't speak. I just sat in the front row, holding the urn, feeling the weight of all the time I'd lost. After the service, we buried her ashes next to Patricia in the family plot at Oakwood Cemetery. I had a headstone made, Natalie Elizabeth Dupree Holloway, beloved daughter, sister, and light. 1976 to 16. I visit her every Sunday now. I bring flowers. I tell her I'm sorry I didn't know. I tell her I'm sorry I wasn't there. And I hope, somewhere, she hears me. Marcus stayed gone for 8 months. The police had his photo circulated, his name on fraud watch lists, alerts at airports and borders. But he was smart. He'd been planning this. The detectives found evidence that he'd opened credit cards in Natalie's name after she died, racked up debt, then disappeared before it all collapsed.
He drained her small savings account.
He'd sold her car and pocketed the cash. He'd even tried to claim life insurance, but the company flagged it as suspicious and denied the claim. This wasn't a crime of passion or desperation. This was premeditated theft. Man, this was a man who saw my daughter's death as an opportunity. I became obsessed with finding him. I couldn't eat, couldn't sleep, couldn't think about anything else. Thomas begged me to let the police handle it, to focus on healing. but I couldn't. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Marcus's face, the way he'd looked at me on my porch, lying so easily, calling me Pops while my daughter's ashes sat unclaimed in a storage unit. I started doing my own research. I joined online groups for families of fraud victims. I hired a private investigator with money I didn't have. I sent Marcus's photo to every contact I could find, hoping someone, somewhere, had seen him. And finally, in May of 2020, I got a lead. A woman in Florida said she'd seen him working at a car dealership in Tampa under a different name. She'd recognized him from a news segment about the case. The detectives moved fast. They coordinated with Tampa PD, ran surveillance, and arrested Marcus in the dealership parking lot. He didn't resist, didn't run, just put his hands up and let them cuff him like it was inevitable. They extradited him back to Virginia, and he sat in jail, awaiting trial. I went to the arraignment, sat in the back row of the courtroom, and watched him stand before the judge in an orange jumpsuit, looking smaller than I remembered. He glanced back once, made eye contact with me, and I saw nothing. No remorse, no shame, just a man who got caught. The judge denied bail, set a trial date for October, and I walked out of that courtroom feeling no relief, because seeing him in chains didn't bring Natalie back. It didn't give me back the 3 years I spent believing a lie. It didn't undo the betrayal. The months leading up to the trial were brutal. Marcus's public defender tried to paint him as desperate, struggling, a man who made a terrible mistake. They claimed he'd been overwhelmed by grief, that he'd never meant to hurt anyone, that he'd planned to come clean but lost control of the situation. It was insulting. The prosecutors laid out the evidence: bank records, forged documents, witness testimony from people he'd manipulated. They showed the jury the texts he'd fabricated, the photos he'd stolen from the internet, the elaborate web of lies he'd spun to keep me in the dark. They called me to the stand. I testified for an hour, walking through every detail: the phone calls, the promises, the years of waiting. The defense attorney asked me if I'd ever suspected Marcus before the package arrived. I said I didn't want to believe my son-in-law was evil. I wanted to believe my daughter was alive. That's not suspicion. That's hope. And he weaponized it. Enormous. The jury deliberated for 3 hours, found him guilty on all counts: fraud, identity theft, embezzlement, forgery. Sentencing was scheduled for 2 weeks later. In the meantime, Marcus was allowed to make a statement. He stood up in that courtroom, looked at me, and said, "I'm sorry, Pops. I never meant for it to go this far." And I stood up too, something I hadn't planned to do, and I said, "Don't call me that. You're not my son. You never were. And you don't get to apologize to me. You owe that apology to Natalie. But she's not here. Because you stole her from me twice. Once when she died, and again every day you made me believe she was alive." The judge banged the gavel and told me to sit down. But I'd said what I needed to say, and Marcus looked at the floor for the rest of the hearing. The sentencing hearing was held on a cold October morning. The courtroom was packed. Reporters, victim advocates, people from my church, even strangers who'd followed the case online. The prosecutor recommended the maximum sentence 15 years. The defense asked for leniency, citing Marcus's clean record before this, his cooperation with authorities after his arrest, his supposed remorse. Bid a chance to make a victim impact statement. I'd written it out the night before, sitting at my kitchen table with a cup of coffee that went cold while I tried to put my pain into words. When the judge called my name, I walked to the front of the room, my hands shaking so bad I could barely hold the paper. I looked at Marcus. He wouldn't look back. I said, "Your Honor, my daughter Natalie was 39 years old when she died. She had lupus. She had struggles. But she had love. She had family. She had a father who would have done anything for her. Marcus Holloway took that from me. He didn't just steal money. He stole my grief. He stole my chance to say goodbye. He stole 3 years of my life that I spent believing a lie, praying for a daughter who was already gone, waiting for a phone call that would never come. I'm 73 years old. I don't have many years left, and I'll spend every single one of them knowing I wasn't there when my baby needed me most.
Not because I didn't care, but because a man I trusted decided my daughter's death was profitable.
You can give him 15 years. You can give him 50. Baby, it won't bring her back. But maybe, just maybe, it'll stop him from doing this to someone else's family. Bless. The judge took a recess. When he came back, he sentenced Marcus to 12 years in federal prison, with restitution ordered for the full amount of stolen disability benefits, approximately $60,000 to $8,000. Placed Marcus on the fraud offender registry, meaning any future financial activity would be monitored. Marcus was let out in cuffs. He looked back one more time, and this time there were tears on his face. I don't know if they were real. I don't care. I walked out of that courthouse and sat in my car for an hour, just staring at the steering wheel, feeling empty. Not relief. Not closure. Just the weight of everything I'd lost and couldn't get back. Thomas took me to lunch afterward. We sat in a quiet diner, picking at food neither of us wanted. He said, "Pop, do you feel better now? Now that he's going away?" I shook my head. I said, "I don't feel anything. I thought I'd feel something. Anger, satisfaction, peace. But I just feel tired." He reached across the table and squeezed my hand. He said, "Then let's go home. Let's go see Mama and Natalie. Let's tell them it's over." So we drove to Oakwood Cemetery. We sat by their graves for an hour, not saying much, just being there. The wind was cold. The leaves were falling, and for the first time in years, I felt like I could breathe again. Not because justice had been served, but because the lies were finally over. The truth, as painful as it was, had set me free. Over the next few months, life started moving again. Slowly, but it moved. I went back to church regularly. Started having Sunday dinners with Thomas and his family. Charlene called every week to check in. I even started volunteering at a local senior center, helping other folks with paperwork and benefits applications, using my pain to make sure nobody else got conned the way I did. But the nights were still hard. I'd lie in bed and think about all the ways I'd failed Natalie. Not by being a bad father, I know I wasn't, but by not seeing through Marcus sooner. By believing his lies because I wanted so badly for my daughter to be okay. Dr. Morgan, my therapist, told me that wasn't failure. That was love. She said, "Vernon, you didn't fail Natalie. Marcus failed her. And he failed you. But you loved her through it all. That's what matters." I wanted to believe her. Some days I did. Bad. Other days, the guilt sat so heavy on my chest I could barely move. The worst part wasn't the grief itself. It was the anger that came with it. Anger at Marcus, yes. But also anger at myself. Anger at God. Anger at the world for being so cruel. I'd wake up some mornings and feel rage bubbling under my skin, hot and sharp, looking for a target. I'd snap at Thomas over nothing. I'd sit in church and feel nothing during the sermon. I'd go to the cemetery and yell at Natalie's headstone, asking her why she didn't tell me she was sick, why she didn't fight harder, why she let Marcus into our lives. I knew it was irrational. I knew she couldn't answer, but the anger had to go somewhere, and since Marcus was locked away, it turned inward. Dr. Morgan said that was normal. That anger was just grief in a different costume. She said I needed to let myself feel it, sit with it, let it pass through me instead of trying to bury it. So I did. Buh. And slowly over months, the anger started to lose its edge. In February of 21, I received a letter. It came in the mail, plain envelope, no return address. Inside was a handwritten note from someone who signed it only as a friend. The letter said, "Mr. Dupre, I worked with Marcus at the pharmaceutical company. I knew Natalie. I knew she was sick. I knew when she died. Bad. I wanted to tell you so many times, but Marcus threatened me. Said if I said anything, he'd make sure I lost my job, my reputation, everything. I'm so sorry I didn't have the courage sooner. I'm the one who sent you the package. I couldn't live with the guilt anymore. I hope you can forgive me. I hope Natalie can forgive me. I hope you find peace." I read that letter 10 times, and then I cried. Not out of anger, not out of grief, but out of gratitude. Because whoever this person was, they'd done what I couldn't. They'd exposed the truth. They'd given me the proof I needed to stop living in limbo. I never found out who sent it. The police tried tracing the postmark, the handwriting, but came up empty. Part of me wanted to know, wanted to thank them, to tell them they didn't need my forgiveness because they'd done nothing wrong. But another part of me understood why they stayed anonymous. Guilt does strange things to people, makes them hide even when they're doing the right thing. So I let it go. I kept the letter in a drawer next to Natalie's death certificate, and every now and then, when the grief felt too heavy, I'd pull it out and read it again. It reminded me that even in the darkest situations, there are people who care, people who can't stay silent forever, people who risk something to do what's right. Spring came. The world started opening back up after the pandemic. I got vaccinated, started going out more, reconnecting with old friends. One Sunday after church, a woman named Lorraine approached me. She was in her 60s, soft-spoken, kind eyes. She said she'd been following my story, that her husband had died years ago, and his brother had stolen his identity afterward, racked up debt, destroyed his name. She said, I know what it's like to grieve someone twice, once when they die, and again when you realize they were betrayed. We started talking regularly, not dating. I wasn't ready for that. Might never be, but just friendship. She understood the weight I carried in a way most people didn't, and slowly I started to feel less alone. Thomas got a promotion at work, moved into a bigger house. His kids were growing up fast. My granddaughter started high school. My grandson made the basketball team. Life kept happening, whether I was ready for it or not. And somewhere along the way, I realized I had a choice. I could stay stuck in the pain, replaying Marcus's betrayal and Natalie's death on a loop until it killed me. Or I could choose to live, not because the pain was gone, but because Natalie would have wanted me to. Because Patricia would have wanted me to. Because staying frozen in grief wasn't honoring them. It was letting Marcus win all over again. Big. So I started choosing life. One day at a time. One breath at a time. I planted a rose bush in my backyard, right next to Patricia's old garden. I called it Natalie's Rose. Every spring, it blooms bright pink, her favorite color. I sit out there sometimes, in the early morning when the world is quiet, and I talk to her. I tell her about Thomas's kids, about church, about the small joys I'm learning to notice again. Birds singing, coffee tasting good, the sun warming my face. I tell her I'm sorry. And I tell her I'm trying. That's all any of us can do, really. Try. Keep going. Keep loving even when it hurts. Keep believing that somewhere, somehow, the people we've lost are still with us. In the roses, in the memories, in the way we choose to live after they're gone. In the summer of 22, I got a phone call I never expected. It was from a woman named Angela, who introduced herself as Marcus's younger sister. She said she'd been estranged from Marcus for years, didn't know about any of this until she saw a news article online. She said, Mr. Dupree, I need you to know. I had no idea what my brother did, and I'm horrified. I'm so sorry. I didn't know what to say. Part of me wanted to hang up, to tell her I didn't need her apologies, but she kept talking. She said Marcus had always been manipulative, even as a kid, lying to get out of trouble, stealing from their parents, blaming others for his mistakes. She said she'd cut him off after he conned their elderly mother out of her savings. She said, I should have warned you. I should have said something when I heard he got married. But I didn't think he'd go this far. I didn't think he'd hurt someone the way he hurt Natalie. We talked for over an hour. Angela told me stories about Marcus, how he'd been charming and smooth-talking, how he'd always had an excuse, how their family had enabled him for years until it was too late. She said she tried to visit him in prison once, to ask him why, to see if there was any humanity left in him. He refused to see her. She said, I think he knows he can't lie to me the way he lied to you. I think he's ashamed. Or maybe he's just a coward. I told her I didn't know which it was, and I didn't care. She asked if there was anything she could do, any way to make amends, even though she knew it wasn't her fault. I said, tell your story. When people ask about Marcus, tell them the truth. Don't let him hide behind excuses or manipulation. Let people know what he's capable of. That's how you honor Natalie. Baby. Angela and I stayed in touch after that. Not close, but friendly. She sent me a card on Natalie's birthday with a donation made in her name to a lupus research foundation. It was a small gesture, but it meant something. It reminded me that families are complicated, that not everyone with the same blood is guilty of the same sins. And it reminded me that accountability matters, not just for the person who commits the crime, but for everyone around them who chooses to either speak up or stay silent. Angela chose to speak up, even though it was years too late, and I respected that. Fall. I started speaking at community events about fraud and elder abuse. I partnered with a local nonprofit that helps families navigate Social Security, Medicare, and disability benefits. I told my story, not for pity, but for awareness. I wanted people to know how easy it is to be deceived by someone you trust. How predators don't always look like monsters. They look like sons-in-law who mow your lawn and call you pops. How isolation and grief make us vulnerable. How asking questions, demanding proof, and trusting your instincts can save you from years of pain. After one event, a woman approached me in tears. She said her daughter had been overseas for 2 years, that her son-in-law kept making excuses, that she hadn't seen proof of life.
I gave her the contact information for the detectives who'd worked my case.
I told her, don't wait, don't hope. Demand answers now. She hugged me. 3 months later, she sent me an email. Her daughter was alive, living in another state, hiding from an abusive marriage. The son-in-law had been lying. but not about death, about control. She said my story gave her the courage to push. I cried reading that email because maybe, just maybe, Natalie's pain had stopped someone else's. The holidays came around again. Christmas 2022. I spent it with Thomas and his family, and for the first time in years, I felt something close to peace. We cooked Natalie's favorite dishes: sweet potato casserole, honey glazed ham, pecan pie. We toasted her memory. We cried a little. We laughed a little, and we remembered that grief doesn't mean forgetting. It means carrying them with us in new ways. That night, after everyone went to bed, I sat on my porch with a cup of coffee and looked up at the stars. I said out loud, "Natalie, if you're out there, I hope you know I'm okay now. I hope you know I forgave myself. I hope you're with your mama, dancing in heaven, free from all the pain." The wind picked up, rustling the trees, and I swear I felt her there, just for a second. Just long enough to know she heard me. In March of 2023, I got a call from the prosecutor's office. Marcus was up for a parole hearing. He'd served 3 years of his 12-year sentence, and his lawyer was arguing for early release based on good behavior. The prosecutor said I had the right to attend, to make a statement, to oppose the parole. I told him I'd be there. Thomas offered to come with me, but I said no. This was something I needed to do alone. On the morning of the hearing, I drove to the parole board facility in Richmond, walked into a cold, sterile room, and sat across from Marcus for the first time since his sentencing. He looked older, thinner, tired. But when he saw me, his eyes hardened. No remorse, just resentment. The parole board asked Marcus questions about his crime, his time in prison, his plans if released. He gave all the right answers. Said he was sorry, that he'd taken classes, that he'd found faith, that he wanted to rebuild his life. Then they asked him, "Do you understand the harm you caused?" And Marcus looked right at me and said, "I made a mistake." But Mr. Dupre never tried to understand my situation. I was grieving too. Natalie was my wife. I felt my blood turn to ice. The audacity, the absolute nerve. I stood up. Board chair told me to sit down, but I didn't. I said, "You want to talk about grief? You cashed my daughter's checks while her ashes sat in a storage unit. You lied to my face for 3 years. You stole my chance to say goodbye. You don't get to claim grief. You don't get to claim anything." The room went silent. The board denied his parole, said he demonstrated a lack of genuine remorse and posed a continued risk. Bag. Marcus was let out, and before the door closed, he looked back at me one last time. And I saw it finally, the thing I'd been looking for all these years. Fear, not of prison, not of consequences, but of being exposed, of being seen for exactly what he was. And in that moment, I realized something. I didn't need his remorse. I didn't need his apology. D. I needed to know that the truth was louder than his lies. And it was. The parole board saw through him. The prosecutor saw through him. The world saw through him. And that was enough. I walked out of that building and sat in my car for a long time, letting the weight of it all settle. For years, I'd carried this rage, this desperate need for Marcus to admit what he'd done, to acknowledge the pain he'd caused. But sitting there, I realized he'd never admit it. Not really. Because people like Marcus don't see their victims as human. They see them as tools. Has means to an end. And I couldn't change that. But I could choose to stop giving him power over me. I could choose to stop waiting for an apology that would never come. I could choose to let go, not because he deserved forgiveness, but because I deserved peace. So I drove to the cemetery. I stood at Natalie's grave, and I said, "Baby girl, I'm done fighting. I'm done being angry. I'm choosing to live now. I'm choosing joy. And I hope that's okay with you." The wind picked up. The sun broke through the clouds. And I walked away feeling lighter than I had in years. That spring, I started writing. Not for publication, not for anyone else, just for me. I wrote about Natalie's childhood, about Patricia, about the life we'd built before everything fell apart. I wrote about Marcus, about the betrayal, about the grief, and I wrote about the healing, the slow, painful, beautiful process of learning to live. Again, Dr. Morgan said writing was a form of witnessing, of making sure the truth existed somewhere permanent. She said, "Your pain matters, Vernon. Your story matters. Don't let it die in silence." So I didn't. I filled notebooks. I filled journals. And every time I wrote Natalie's name, I felt a little bit of her come back to me, not as a ghost, but as a memory I could hold without it breaking me. It's December 2024 now, 5 years since I opened that package in the parking lot. 8 years since Natalie died. I'm 78 years old. My back hurts more. My highs aren't what they used to be. But I'm still here, still standing, still choosing to live every single day. Thomas and I have Sunday dinners every week. My grandkids come over and tell me about school, about their lives, about their dreams. Lorraine and I take walks in the park, talk about books and old movies and the small joys we've rediscovered. I still visit Natalie and Patricia at the cemetery every Sunday after church. I bring fresh flowers. I tell them about my week, and I thank them for loving me, for shaping me, for giving me a reason to keep going even when the world felt unbearable. Marcus is still in prison. I don't think about him much anymore. He's not worth the energy. Once in a while, someone will ask me if I've forgiven him, and I tell them the truth. I've let go of the anger, but forgiveness isn't the same as absolution. He doesn't get a pass. He doesn't get my grace. But he also doesn't get to live rent-free in my head anymore. I took that power back, and I gave it to the people who deserve it. To Natalie's memory, to Thomas, to my grandkids, to the friends who stood by me. That's where my energy goes now. That's where my love goes. I still speak at community events. I still help families navigate fraud and elder abuse. I still tell Natalie's story because it might save someone else. And people listen. They cry. They thank me. They tell me I'm brave. I don't feel brave. I feel like a man who survived something that should have destroyed him. But maybe that's what bravery is. Not the absence of pain, but the refusal to let it win. If you're watching this from somewhere in the world, and you've ever been lied to by someone you loved, I need you to know you're not alone. The betrayal isn't your fault. The grief isn't a weakness, and healing doesn't mean forgetting. It means learning to carry the weight without letting it crush you. It means choosing to live even when living feels impossible. So if you made it this far, if you listened to an old man pour his heart out, I want to say thank you. Thank you for bearing witness. Thank you for letting Natalie's story matter. And if this story touched you, if it made you think or feel or remember someone you lost, do me a favor. Hit that like button. Subscribe if you want to hear more stories like this. And drop a comment telling me what part of the world you're watching from. Because knowing I'm not shouting into the void, knowing someone out there hears me, that means something. That means Natalie's life and her death and everything I went through wasn't for nothing. I'm 78 now. I don't know how many years I've got left, but I know this. I'm going to spend them living, not perfectly, not painlessly, but fully, with love, with gratitude, with the knowledge that even after the worst betrayals, even after the deepest losses, peace is possible. It won't look the way you expect. It won't come easy, but it'll come. And when it does, you'll know. Because you'll wake up one morning and realize the weight on your chest is a little lighter. The breath in your lungs is a little deeper. And the sun, even on the coldest days, feels a little warmer. That's the peace I found. And I pray wherever you are, you find it too.